One common statement among linguists is that the English language is built on the language spoken by Angles, Saxons, and Jutes. The impact of these three West Germanic tribes on the English language was so immense that many historians credit most of the development of the English language to them. So, the question on everyone's mind is, who were they? As stated already, the Angles, Saxons, and the Jutes were each tribes that invaded Britain when Rome withdrew after 400 years of control. The invasions began in 449 CE and went relatively smoothly. The transition was made a bit easier by certain factors. First off, the Anglo-Saxons had a pretty similar dialect to the natives, which made it easier for everyone to communicate. Another similarity between these groups was appearance. Since the Germanic tribes and the natives looked alike, it was much easier for the Anglo-Saxon people to blend in. Although it may seem nice, this conversion wasn't so simple and sweet. The Anglo-Saxon culture was forced upon the native people. Wait a minute. I've used the phrase native people, and I think we should clarify who they are. The earliest known inhabitants of Britain were the Celts, aka the Britons. They moved into the area in 800 BC, and eventually were driven out by the Germanic tribes. Some chose to flee to northern France, others were pushed back into places like Scotland and Wales, while other Celts moved further into the mainland Europe. Once the invasion ended, a 7-kingdom rule was established. Not one kingdom, but 7. Superiority shifted a lot, mainly through Angles and the Saxons, and Jutes. This method of power distribution, referred to as a heptarchy, makes sure that one king does not become too powerful. If one kingdom tried to take over, the other kingdoms would gang up on it. The heptarchy consisted of Mercia, Wessex, Sussex, Essex, East Anglia, Northumbria, and Kent. No, not that Kent. These tribes originally had slightly different dialects. Kentish, spoken by the Jutes, West Saxon, spoken by the Saxons, and English, spoken by the Angles. Slight differences grew larger and larger over time.
Every language has its own dialect, so it's unreasonable to assume that Old English did not. The known main dialects were Southwestern, Southeastern, Mercian, and Northumbrian. To be clear, these are probably not the only dialects of Old English, but they were the ones that were written down and are known by historians. They developed because of a number of reasons. First of all, the Germanic tribesmen didn't speak the same language in the first place before they settled down because they weren't socially or politically united, and even after they settled down, they were divided into different kingdoms. Also, if two villages started at the same dialect, they would probably end up speaking differently because of the social separation, and, after a couple of generations, multiple dialects could have been formed. One question you may have is, well, if there were so many dialects, what was the standard? The answer to that question is the West Saxon dialect. One very significant reason it became the dominant and effectively the official language of Britain was because the Vikings came in and conquered everything but the Wessex. To be clear, that didn't mean the others stopped speaking Old English, because they didn't, but it did make it the only kingdom that politically used Old English and wrote in it. Alfred the Great was the ruler at the time and played a huge role in preserving Old English. He made the initiative to write more things down and to archive important documents. Because of his actions, historians were able to know more about the civilization, including things about their literature, political systems, and history.
Old English shares less with modern English than the name may suggest. This can be clearly seen in the written version of both languages. One example often used to show the differences between the two languages is the Lord's Prayer. As you can see, the languages look almost completely different. On a language tree, English is clearly shown to be a Germanic language. Fittingly, most of the vocabulary, around 85%, comes from Old High German because the Anglo-Saxons spoke West Germanic. It is curious that the language we speak today is named English because Old English is more closely related to modern German and Dutch, as well as Old Frisian, Old Low German, Old Low Franconian, and West Saxon. So, how did English get its name? The name English was derived from the word Angli, which is what the Germanics and Romans called the Angles. Angli turned into Angle, and eventually the place where the Jutes, Saxons, and Angles lived was called Engeland. From that, the word was adapted, and the language was called Anglisk. One of the many differences between Old and Modern English is the use of genders in Old English. Much like Latin and Modern German, Old English had 3 classes of nouns called genders. These were masculine, feminine, and neuter. Genders did not influence the meaning of nouns, Nor did the meaning of nouns influence the gender. Genders were purely grammatical, and often didn't make very much sense due to their random assignment. All genders do is change the way a noun is conjugated. Each gender had its own strong and weak declensions, which the noun of that gender follow. This also means that some nouns are weak and others are strong. This was another purely grammatical classification that was assigned to words randomly without making much sense. Adjectives always had the same gender as the noun they were modifying.
Another thing that influences how the words in a sentence are conjugated is the case. Cases still appear in modern English, but there are fewer of them. Today, English has two cases, the nominative and the accusative. Old English, similar to modern German, has four cases: nominative, accusative, dative, and genitive. Nominative was the same as it is today. It was used to show the subject of a sentence or clause. Accusative only included the direct object of the sentence, instead of everything after the verb, like in modern English. The dative case was for the indirect object and the object of a preposition. The genitive case could be thought of as showing possession. For example, let's take the sentence, "The king of the land sang me a song." The king is nominative, the land is genitive, the song is accusative, and the me is dative. In total, there are 8 forms that each noun can take. Adjectives had their own endings. However, they did correspond to the gender of the nouns they modified. Old English had different ways to decline adjectives based on them being weak or strong. Usually they go before nouns. However, if there are 2 adjectives describing a noun, one comes before the noun and the other afterward. Adjectives, since they have to match the case and gender of the noun, can be singular or plural, have 24 forms in total. Because of all the different endings put onto the ends of words, showing the case in which they are, word order in Old English was more flexible than it is in modern English. However, the most common word order was subject, verb, object, which still remains today. On top of all the grammatical differences, as you have noticed in the line from the Lord's Prayer, Old English has some letters that don't exist in modern English. The 4 main letters that entirely don't exist in the modern English alphabet are thorn, win, ash, and f. Thorn sounds like a th, win like a w, ash was a mix between a and e, like seen in the word aether, and f was a softer form of the th sound.
Although the languages are not very similar, one can see how Old English evolved and was morphed into the 3rd most spoken language on earth. Conquest, simplification, and other methods of language evolution helped to shape English into the language it is today. Nowadays, there are many dialects of English spoken all over the 7 continents, and every last one of them can be traced back to a group of Germanic tribes, which lived in what is now called Great Britain.